The importance of practice. Now, I'm going to be demonstrating how to paint a donut, which is pretty darn intense, and this is also done in real time. The whole painting took me about 30 minutes or so. But the thing that I want to talk about is the importance of practice. And do I paint a lot of donuts? No. But I've painted a good amount of donuts. I think I've painted about 20 donut paintings. I've sold quite a few of them. I have a couple that are still for sale if you're interested. Like this one in particular. It's still for sale unless it's sold by the time you listen to this. But either way, this is a small painting. It's 4x6 painted on Alumilite, which is aluminum with a corrugated plastic in the middle and then aluminum on the backside. And they already have it pre-primed. So that's why it looks like a nice flat surface right now. Off to the right are just a few colors. That blue that's there at the top is King's Blue. The red is Perylene Red. And I think there's also some quinacridone magenta. The color that I'm currently using to lay in is kind of off to the right. It's off the page. But that is a transparent oxide red, or some other manufacturers call it transparent earth red. Either way, now I'm painting with transparent oxide yellow because the donut is kind of a yellow value. And this is not your standard regular donut. This is an old-fashioned donut, which is why the shape looks kind of funky. And there's a lot more complexity to this donut. But I want to show you in real time how slow and how much time I'm actually taking to make sure that I'm getting the shapes right. So back to the point. Why on earth do we practice? Well, practicing is really, really important. But in order to have a good practice, you need to make sure that you know what you're going to be practicing. For example, with this donut painting, this is a practice painting. That's all it is to me. I'm not trying to make this wonderful work of art, this amazing piece that is going to be my masterpiece. This is just getting me kind of back into the swing of things. I think it was a while before I had painted, and when I say a while, maybe a couple of days or maybe even a week. And even with a week of not painting, I tend to blow chunks. So I have to do a practice painting to kind of get back into the groove of things. This painting kind of started off that way. So here I've drawn in the contour so that I know where it's going to be placed on the page. I know the general proportions, what the ellipse at the top looks like versus the ellipse at the bottom. And I am going in with a darker value semi-transparent color, so it's not as dark as it could be. I tend to like to work similar to Sargent. Ideally, I would like to paint like Sargent. I mean, that would be freaking awesome. But you can see in his paintings when he works on his paintings, or when he did, because he's dead now. It's been like almost 100 years since he's been dead. But he would be very direct with his paint application. He would work from the middle values and then add the darks and the lightest lights last. And that's kind of what I'm doing with this painting. Working into those darks, not all the way dark, not the abyss of blackness dark, but just some darker values so that I can build the lights on top of it. The other reason why I like working dark to light is the paint quality. So the more paint I add to the canvas, the more texture I'm applying, and the thicker the paint goes. And the thicker the paint goes, sometimes it makes it really difficult to manipulate and turn form. But I like building up paint, and I like using really thick gobs of paint on top of other paint. So if you run into an issue where you're working on your painting and you're having a hard time getting the right color and value, then you learn quickly that the more color you add that you want on the canvas, if it's thicker, it'll stick to the canvas better. And you can build up these thicker layers to get the texture and the value that you want. Whereas if you keep adding paint that is the same thickness as its previous layer, this is referencing to direct painting, which is what I'm doing right here. I'm directly painting into the paint. So with direct painting, the more paint you add on top of that first layer, the better off the color is going to be and the more fresh it's going to be. If I take the same consistent thickness of paint and add it on top of a layer that's already there, it's going to mix with that layer, and my colors will start to get a little dirty, especially if the value is different than its previous layer. So without getting into too much complexity on how I like to turn form with adding more and more paint, I do like to have some areas of my painting thinner so that people can see the transparency of various colors. In fact, talking about transparency, you can get a higher chroma color by using a transparent over white than you can with an opaque color over white. And maybe there will be an example here in this painting that I could show you what I'm talking about, but currently with this painting, I'm trying to get more neutral colors in there because I start off really brown and red. And so I'm adding some grays into the color because even though the donut is brownish in nature, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, a little bit of orange, you got to have some blues in there. Those blues act as a complementary to the colors that you're placing down on the canvas. And for me, I think it's an awesome way to turn form and shift it so it looks more natural. Like right there, that's a pretty green brushstroke that I put in there. It's actually really gray, but it looks green because all the other colors are more orange. And I keep adding these gray colors in those halftones where the light is kind of raking into the shadow shapes. The shadow shapes are going to be slightly higher in chroma, but that terminator, as the forms start to shift into the shadows, it's going to be a little bit more gray. At least that's what I was seeing in this painting. That is not a rule that everybody should follow or anything, because sometimes your chroma is going to change, your values are going to change based off of what you're looking at in the reference. Back to practicing. So this is a practice session. I am doing this painting for kicks and giggles. It is just for me to understand better how to apply economy of brushstroke. So each brushstroke that I'm placing in there, I'm trying to be intentional with the shape that I'm creating, with the color and the value. You could almost say it's like paint by number, except I'm making the number up, and I'm making the value up, and I'm making the color up. But it is a simple shape that I'm attempting to create. I'm keeping the spherical shape in check. I'm adding a little bit more variety by taking this red and putting it over the gray color so that I have better clarity on the shapes that I'm looking at. I remember actually when I was painting this little part that my values were starting to get too compressed and almost too muddy, and I was losing some of the shapes. That's a consequence of doing too many brush strokes. So could I have done this practice better? You better believe your britches. And what I could have done better would be economy of line. Put a brush stroke down and leave it. Like why do I have to do 5 brush strokes over the same area? Because I'm trying to blend it? Does blending it really make it that better? I don't think so, but some people might think so. Working into the painting, very important to do. But when you are practicing, make sure that you have an intention that you're sticking to. And that intention for this painting was economy of brushstroke and trying to make it look like the donut. These old-fashioned donuts can be pretty darn complex. I think they can be pretty darn complex. They're not just some sphere that's sitting there and you have a sphere on top of another sphere with a sphere that's cut out of the sphere. But it is high angles and shapes. There are subtle transitions along with subtle values and colors. So it can make it, I can make this thing ultra complex and hyper realistic. For me, I like paintings that look like paintings. They feel like paintings. Oh, and here I go. I started to add those light values, those little highlights that are sitting there. You see, I'm squiggling the brushstroke across. I'm not putting in or laying down with that filbert bristle brush that I'm using. I'm not just plopping it on. I'm using the brush to kind of push around those little value transitions and mixing it with the halftones of the donut so I can define the shapes a little bit better. Those are my light shapes, and then I don't quite have all of the shadow shapes nailed in yet, but I do have with those deep dark reds. Those are generally the shadows that I'll be using. Here I go into the shadows because I realized, I don't have a very good shadow shape there. I got to change that. But now I might have muddied it up a little bit too much, which is fine because I can just paint over it and make it better, right? The nice thing about a practice painting too is you don't have to sell it. You don't have to feel the pressure of painting it so that it'll sell. And is it good enough to be able to sell? You're doing it as a practice so that you can hone your skills and do a better job with your next painting. Because the next painting is probably the one that's going to take all the time and in the world, and you're forced to sell it. So, or maybe you're not ever forced to sell it. I like selling my paintings. I know some people that don't like selling their paintings, and I know some people that can only sell their paintings, meaning they have to do, everything they do has to be sold. There's no such thing as a practice. It is all application, and it's all sellable. So when I'm working on my practice paintings, I don't care so much about that. For me, there's no real risk to experimenting. There's no real risk in messing up. There's no risk in being successful. It's all creative and exploratory. I'm focusing on what I can do to make this painting better. Kind of like dropping in those nice little darker values. There are creases in this donut and crevices that are popping out because it's old-fashioned, right? So that doesn't mean it's an old donut. I mean, it was a good donut, I think. I painted these donuts and I didn't even eat them. I think I gave them to my kids, which is probably bad. I'm a bad parent. Either way, I come back in here, start putting in some of these darker values to complement the lighter values. You see how the paint quality is slightly thicker? Because I'm trying to build those darks in. Just like the light values were slightly thicker so that I could build in those lights. I really am not the talkative type. I don't know how people can make these videos and talk the whole entire time in real time. I've been teaching for 18 years, and I still have a hard time working on my painting and talking at the same time, which is why I do this voiceover stuff. But then I find out when I do this voiceover stuff that it's still hard because how on earth can I talk about something that I don't know. The important thing is work and practice, because you're the only one that's actually going to make it better. If you keep finding reasons or things to distract you from practicing or creating your art, you're not going to go anywhere fast. There's a artist that I really enjoy his work. I have a couple of his art pieces that I own, some of his books. His name is Nicholas Uribe, and I probably butchered his name because I don't speak Spanish. I'm pretty sure he's Colombian, and he's living in Colombia right now. But that dude is phenomenal at painting. He does a painting every single day. It's like clockwork. I don't understand how he can do what he does. Being an educator, I don't paint every single day. I paint a good amount. I try to do a painting every other day. On the weekends, I'll take some time to work on my paintings or spend time with my family. But working on your craft is a really hard thing to do. It's hard when you're not motivated to do it. It's easy if you're motivated to do it. And you need to figure out what you need to do to increase your motivation to create your art. For me, the thing that motivates me to do my art is curiosity. I want to see what I can do to become a better artist. I want to know how I can become a better artist. And I will read books. I will look at artwork. And here's another side note. I get discouraged when I look at stuff on Instagram currently. Will this change? Yeah, it could possibly change. In like the next 2 weeks, I might look at Instagram and be, oh, whoa, I'm inspired. I want to do more art. But I have found that when I look at social media and watch other people create their paintings, I ask myself, because I'm a pretty competitive person, I ask myself, why can't I do that? Well, I can do it. Why couldn't I do it? I just need to do it. So that's one thought. Then the other thought that I have is, oh my gosh, they're so freaking good. I should just quit now. Well, I think I could have quit being a painter hundreds of times by now. I spent a good amount of money, $50,000 to build this studio space that I'm currently in. And I love this space. Even with this space set up and with everything set up almost perfectly, I still have a hard time finding the energy, the willpower to create. So the thing that I have found, and this is a really good book that I think all of you should read, it's called The Motivation Myth. And I don't know who the author is. I listen to audiobooks. I don't really read books, I should say that. I look at pictures. I'm an artist. And I have read a lot of books, but it just is not very entertaining for me. Either way, The Motivation Myth, he talks about something that I think is very important. He said, and this is why I think practicing is really important. He says something similar to this statement. You cannot motivate yourself by thinking about motivating yourself. Meaning we feel like we have willpower and this willpower to do something. Right? Wow, as soon as I get the willpower, I'm going to do this painting, or I'm going to work on this painting. And he says, no, that doesn't happen. It doesn't work. The thing that does work is setting up your environment to help you become successful. And what he means by that, or she, I can't remember if it's male or female, the author, but it was a male's voice that read the book, the audiobook. So that's what I'm going to go with. And anyways, he said, for example, like if you don't have candy sitting around the house, and students will know I use reference to sugar all the time because I'm a freaking sugar addict. But if you have candy sitting around and you want your goal or your motivation to not eat candy, you need to get rid of the candy out of your environment. Because when it's sitting there, you'll walk over and you'll just eat it because it's available. It's easy. It's right there. But if you remove it from your environment, you physically have to get into a vehicle or walk down the street or whatever. You have to exchange money. You have to figure out what you want to get or buy. And then you actually buy it, and then you can consume whatever sugar you're wanting to get. Well, it's the same type of thing with painting or creating any type of art or being creative with anything. It helps to just sit down and do something. So sometimes I will come into my studio space and I won't know what on earth I'm going to do with my time. I have like 3 commissions that I'm behind on, and I have other paintings I need to do for art shows that I'm behind on. I have all these 5, 6 paintings that I need to work on, but I just don't have the motivation to do it. So all I do is I say, don't think, just do. I'll take the painting, I'll put it up, and I will just start painting. And I found that as soon as I start painting, things start to work out and the motivation increases, and I want to continue to work on it, and I want to push through whatever I'm working on. And that's exactly what this Motivation Myth book was talking about. You need to make it a priority and actually physically do something before you get motivated to do it, which I always thought was the opposite. I thought motivation was something that was just in you. Well, it's not, people. You have to physically do stuff, which is kind of detrimental to our world right now because we have all this social media and stuff that's so easily attainable and it's just right there. And I'm bored. I have 5 minutes. I can look at what is on Instagram. But then that, for me, it doesn't motivate me to look at Instagram to create art. I look at Instagram and I start to get discouraged because I'm not posting as much as all these other artists are posting. I'm not creating art as much as all these other artists are creating. And so I, in my creative or competitive nature, just start going downhill. And it presents a problem for me. So I try to stay off of social media unless I'm trying to learn something specific. And just like this practice painting, I want to go on and observe something specific. If I'm having a hard time working through a painting and I need a creative idea, I will literally set a timer and look for 10 minutes at art books or Instagram or YouTube, or I don't even really get on Facebook, but I will use those to find something specific. It's when you use those and get lost in what you're looking for that things tend to not work out and you waste your time and you're like, wow, I just spent 2 hours looking at images that have no benefit for me. And there's another fun thing to talk about with practicing, but being an artist is kind of a selfish endeavor. Yeah, we say as artists, we're creating and looking at beauty, but if you really think about it, artists are creating artwork mostly for themselves. And yes, they're trying to sell it, but it is honestly for our own sanity. At least I think. Maybe that's why I create art, is for my own sanity. But I love the romantic notion of creating something and enjoying the whole entire process through it and going, wow, I did that. That's awesome. And it is nice to sell artwork and get money for it, because that means somebody else thinks that it's just as important as you put that financial dollar on there. But some people don't sell, and they just do it for their creative process, for their thought process, which is totally fine. Coming back here to the painting, did you see how dark I put those values in there? That, I think, was asphaltum, which is a color made by Gamblin, and it's a really dark, high chroma orange, but really low value. Here I'm taking that blue and also gray and putting it next to the donut so that it shows a cast shadow, and I'm getting some variation in color on that cast shadow because the donut is basically done. I've figured out what colors I want, and the thing that I like about this study are the variation in colors. You see the pink in the bottom right-hand corner of the donut, and then it gets more gray as the light is bouncing off of the white surface into the donut, and then the top part of the donut is more yellow because that's where it was not burned, but the fresh part of the donut was split open and you could see parts of it. And here in the cast shadow, I'm just trying to make it interesting. I got to make that shadow as interesting as I've made the donut. I guess I don't have to, but I think it's better if I do. So here I have that red and the high chroma blue that I've placed next to it in the shadow shape, and the values are pretty much close to the same. I'm getting that yellowish color, mixing it in with the blue, and that kind of makes a very neutralized green, which again is totally reasonable, but the value is good. So here I'm taking Naples yellow. That's just like straight Naples yellow, I think. Maybe there's just a little bit of white added to it. And I'm throwing it down on the surface. That will make the donut not look as orange. And then in the background, I'm taking that King blue with a little bit of the Naples yellow mixed with it and putting it in the background. I really like using the combination of these two. King blue and Naples yellow are light values. They're relatively high in chroma, and they're not that strong of a color. So I can make them neutral or gray really easy. And it's a beautiful gray. I think it's a beautiful gray. So here I've mixed it into the foreground. This is the light shape. And I'm using a larger bristle brush to create those forms. And then in the background or above the donut, it's more blue. And that is important because I want to create a sense of depth. Cool colors tend to recede. Warm colors tend to come forward. And so I'm trying to get that effect of this is on a table that is going back into perspective. It's not a flat table that the donut's kind of leaning up against. It's sitting on top of a surface that is closer to the viewer at the bottom and further away from the viewer at the top. So I like to play with that, and instead of making everything flat and the same color value, I will try to push those flat planes back. And the way I like doing it is by playing with cool versus warm and keeping the values really close together. I feel like that gives a good natural viewpoint of the painting. So here I feel like I'm petting the paint a little bit too much, but that edge, I just need to soften that out. There we go. Couple of brush strokes, soften out that edge, using the tip of the brush to be able to create that harder edge at the end and the softer edge on the cast shadow, because I want the shadow to be separate from the object. If I made that cast shadow as hard edged as the surface to the donut, then it would look kind of funny. It wouldn't have a natural feel to it. So again, going back into those cool colors to mix in that wider value, I'm just trying to get more consistency with value and color, and I bring it down to the yellow, the Naples yellow that I mixed down in the foreground. That's basically it. Now I go around the edge of the donut, and the reason why I do that is because I want to have a quote-unquote clean brush to finish off the edge quality between the background and the donut. The downside of doing something like this is you might create what I would call a halo around the object. And there's an awesome artist that I knew. He died a couple of years ago. His name's Glenn Blakely. He would always tell me, oh, I hate it when painters create that halo around their paintings. That means they painted the background in afterwards. And I agree with him. I try to not create that halo effect. You can see it right now where it's white right around the donut. So I'm going to come in and get rid of that here in... Okay, so here we go. This is the intense part. I'm using that. I'm rolling the brush just slightly. I'm slightly rolling it so that it is barely hitting the edge of the donut, coming across, wiping it off so that I have a clean brush to come back in for a second round. And that will just clear up the whole entire thing. Here I go with that clean brush. Again, on the edge. Got to soften out that edge on the cast shadow and then slowly make my way onto the donut. Part of it was getting a little bit too soft. So I'm, again, cleaning the brush, picking up some of that background paint so that I don't create that halo, coming right to the edge. Ba-bam. Man, painting is so much fun. All you have to do is just do it. Just do it. If you don't enjoy it, then why the heck are you doing it? Maybe you're making a living with your artwork, and that's probably why you're doing it. But you got to make art interesting for yourself, not only for yourself, but also for collectors and other people that are viewing it. And what does that mean to you? Does that mean you need to work on your brushstroke? Does that mean you need to work on your value, your brush economy? Maybe you do an entire painting without a brush. I love doing those type of assignments or practices, just experimenting with different tools to see what you like or what you don't like and what is working, what's not working. Oh, this is one last other important thing. I'm doing all these vertical brush strokes. The reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want to have light reflection on the background. I'd rather have light reflection on the donut. So I'm doing vertical brush strokes to kind of simplify the texture of the background. And here I just lightened that up just a little bit because I want to have that reflected light going from the donut onto the tabled surface and also cut out some of those shapes. So I hope that this video was informative. If it wasn't, I'm sorry, that sucks. But I'm going to try to make some more videos like this to talk about things that have nothing to do with what I'm actually painting in terms of subject matter. but maybe they could be beneficial for an artist. So, what motivates us to paint? Nothing. You need to just start doing it, and then you'll find the motivation to actually paint. All right, I hope you all have an excellent day. And remember, paint on.